GBG, or GB Group as it's known on the market, it's been around for 30 years. I've been in the business for 10 years, started out 20 million turnover, million profit and a market cap of 17. Brokers' expectation this year is about 195 million turnover, 45 million profit, and current market cap's around 1.1 billion. So we've had a good journey at the past 10 years and we're just getting going. So what do? We help our customers with B2C organisations simplify, safely and securely interact with their consumers. To try and use an analogy, I see there's quite a few younger members of the audience here, but if you remember the blind date, Cilla Black, she used to ask the questions on blind date to say, who are you and where do you come from? And that's really what we do across 65 countries and a lot of other territories from our location side. Our marketplace has tremendous tailwinds in it. You can see from all of those, you'd recognise all of the tailwinds we've got in the market. To scale it, it's in the billions. Yeah, we're small at the moment, but we've got a long journey to go on this. So to scale the market, it's in the billions. It's a big marketplace. It's early stage because we're carving niches out of other marketplace, and we've got a long way to go. Our business model, I'll spend a little time talking about, not very good with this, our 3 global business: location, identity and fraud. Just to frame it a little bit on each one, and then I'll move on to the items that are impacting it. So fundamentally what we do is we access data sets, over 500 globally. We use our proprietary software and algorithms to layer the data sets and triangulate the outcomes of those to give a confident answer to our customers. So on location, in its simplest form in the UK, when you go into any retail website and you type in your postcode, drop-down list of 8 to 16 addresses, that's us. Yeah, we launched the product in the US in November 17, and we've had great early traction. eBay's a customer, Nordstrom, Abercrombie and Fitch, Kohl's, good name customers. US is 6 times the size of the UK. 6 months later, we launched in Germany. First customers like Aldi, Foot Locker, and Hugo Boss. Yeah, and then we bought a business in Australia called VIX Verify Global. So in our location side, we've got a market-leading product that gets to the answer really quickly. In the US, it's done differently than the UK. In the US, all of the address details are corrected after the event. With our type-head functionality, the address details are there up front as soon as the consumer's 4 or 5 keystrokes. That's our location business. Our identity business, we access data sets across 65 countries, and we can verify 4.4 billion people globally. That's non-face-to-face verification. It does help having China in that because it's 1 billion people in the 4.4, but it's still 65 countries in the prime countries there. Examples of the compliance element leading up to the verification are know your customer checks, KYC checks you'll be familiar with, anti-money laundering checks, age verification checks. Most of the European gambling companies that customers are to do age verification in a fraction of a second, and high-value item checks. So examples of those will be Nike in Holland for deliveries into Europe, Etsy, New Jersey for deliveries into Europe, Microsoft and Apple for hardware deliveries out of Ireland into Europe. They all use the verification check that we perform. Again, in its raw sense, let's say a Chinese citizen, a student wanted to open a bank account in London, they can sit in Beijing, scan the documents in, or key the documents in. Our software brings the answers back from the country and verifies that person is who they say they are. We do millions of checks per annum on this. So that's the identity part of the business. The fraud is pure software. We don't access data on this. It sits within the bank's firewalls. We are very, very strong in Asia Pacific. We've got 9 of the top 10 banks in Malaysia, 5 of the top 20 in Indonesia. We've got 2 of the top 3 in Singapore, and so on. 40 banks in China using it. We're doing global rollouts for BNP Paribas and Citigroup. So the software on that is, it detects more fraud because our software is written in local language, detects a fraud in local language, doesn't transliterate back to a Romanic language. Yeah, easy to use from the fraud teams. So there are 3 global lines of business. I'll come on to some of the, to why we're different really. So we've been doing this, I say, for 30 years. The international side of the growth has been since 2006, so past 13 years. And it is really hard to get access to data sets in the various countries, and our software is being tuned over that time period. The software layers the information and then triangulates the answer, so the outcomes are always with a high degree of confidence. We're in a co-opetition environment, and that word does exist. So we buy from, sell to, and compete with the global credit bureaus. Yeah. So, you know, we're Equifax's largest customer in the UK. We buy from Experian in the US. We buy from TransUnion in South Africa and Canada. Yeah. There's many other credit bureaus in all of the other countries, and they will sell their data to us, but won't sell it to the global credit bureaus because they become an in-country threat. Okay, so there's a natural barrier to entry there. And we're like the honest broker or Switzerland of the marketplace. If I then look at I was really just talking about the identity side there. In the location side, the developers and the retailers can drag and drop the software, pay us by credit card, and the software can be up and running on their website within 5 minutes. Yeah. So we've got leading edge position. We've got access to address information globally that's layered on with sat-nav information, that's layered on with GPS information. So you can talk to your phone and say, I'm here, and that pinpoints exactly where you are. So there's no one else that compete with our software in the location, and so we've got a long way to go in the market growth on that. And I've talked about the fraud barrier to entry, is it? Our software is easy to use, and once it's in with those banking customers of ours, it stays in because the cost of change is very high. So our strategy is to continue organic growth, recruiting salespeople, continue to develop the software in as many countries as we can. We've got UK businesses. We'll try and optimize the growth there, and we have also acquired 12 businesses in the past 8 years. We'll continue with the bolt-on acquisitions over time. Our vision, objectives and strategy, this is what all of our employees see in the organisation. It simply says to them really where we're going. We do monthly updates on communications with the whole company. Got 1,000 team members across 16 countries. So everyone knows in the business where we're going, and everyone is really supportive of that. And I know a lot of businesses say this, but our employees, our people, are the most important thing we ever have with the business. Our employee engagement, 90% of our team members responded, and 90% said we're a great place to work. And that's been consistently over 80%, for the past 8 years. And now we've got 1,000 people saying that. Really important for the future of the business. So a bit about the performance. The top left, where is the revenue growth? Compound growth is 24% over the past 7 years there. About half of it has been organic growth. The rest has been the acquisitive growth. And the broker's consensus is, for the 143 million there, is saying about 195 million this year, and we're confident of that. The profit on the top right, the broker's consensus is about 45 million for this year. So we've performed pretty well, and I say we're just really getting going. The operating profit here is what we've said to the fund managers in the market is that we will reinvest for future, reinvest operational leverage, anything above 23% margins in technology and sales and marketing to sustain long-term growth. And that's quite unusual in the stock market and that, but we firmly believe there's long-term sustainable growth in this. And obviously the fund managers and people like yourself that invest in the business hopefully will understand the reasoning behind that. I'll only cover small parts of this. So 45% of the business is now outside of the UK. If you go back 3 years ago, that was 19%. At the end of this year, it'll be well over 50%. We've got 19,000 customers. It was 17,000, and then 15,000 the year before. So we're in it's not a very professional phrase, but we're in the customer grab phase of our growth. We've got thousands and thousands of more customers we can win, but we're in that phase at the moment. That will continue for several years. And I've already talked about the 90% of our employees. Again, this is from our results presentation, but I'll just call out a couple of points. Our technology, we have, with buying businesses and developing platforms, we're breaking our technology into microservices, and we have been doing that for 2 years now. So it's easy to take a piece of technology for any business that we acquire and reuse it in our other platforms. And we're joining 2 of the platforms together, which is the location identity, and that product will be out later on in this calendar year. And that will give significant benefit to our existing customers and help the technology do cross-sell. You've all been in business long enough to know cross-sell is really difficult to do. So we're allowing the technology to do the cross-sell for us. On the financial side, the capital allocation, I've talked about our reinvestment of the operational leverage. About 95% of our EBITDA turns to cash, so we're a high cash generation business. I'll talk about one of the acquisitions in a second. We spent $300 million buying a US business a few months ago, so we're paying down that debt quickly, so we'll be doing 1 times leverage of that at the end of the year. We have a progressive dividend policy. The recommendation to shareholders this year is increasing our dividend by 13%. And the rest of the money, when the debt's paid down, we'll use for further acquisitions. The acquisition history here, it shows 12 over the last 8 years. The market, as I said, is still early stage. It's highly fragmented. The acquisition pipeline that we've got is at least 40 businesses. And there are only 3 of them over $25 million turnover. So there's a big market that we can acquire as we're growing as well as our organic growth. We're primarily looking for technology, the red dot on there. And the reason for that is that we want to accelerate our growth by buying in things to save us developing it. And the second element is geographic reach. We're buying businesses to move from a global capability to in-region and in-country. So a couple of examples of those. Ideology, US business. We bought it in mid-February this year. We paid $300 million for it. It was a $38 million revenue business, growing at 15% with 40% operating margins. A lovely business. But the reason we bought it is that it does US verifications domestic, and it also has a fraud consortium. So all of its 500 customers share fraud information with it, and that fraud information can then alert the other customers as that possible fraudster is entering their website. So fantastic technology there that's developed over the year. We bought VIX Verify Global, which is an Australia, New Zealand entry point, and VIX was loss-making at the time, so we paid quite a low price for it, 2.5 times revenue, and we took the synergies really early, so it was back in profit the last financial year. And we're using this to grow out our capability in Australia, New Zealand, and then use the resources to start moving slowly but surely into Southeast Asia. So just to, I'll probably cover this quite fast. I'm sure there's quite a few questions, but so we've had very good trading performance over the last year and previous years. The market is in the billions, and it is early stage. And probably the only way I can prove that to you is along the lines of the amount of targets we've got in the acquisition pipeline. Yeah, because there's many, many more businesses. There's a lot of private equity investment going into this in the US. So the market is pretty warm or hot in the US. We've got a clear approach on how we're going to grow in the future, and that is understood, aligned with all of the people that work for the business. Everyone understands where we're going and why we're doing what we're doing. We are highly focused on organic growth. The guidance I give the analysts in the marketplace is low double-digit organic growth, 10 to 12%. And then we have bolt-on acquisitions over the top of that. And as I've said, we've got very good pipeline of acquisition targets. So I know I've been through the presentation really quickly, and I know I'm quite boring to listen to, but if you want to listen to any of the analyst notes, or we had a couple of capital market days, we've got on our website, you can watch the videos and things like that, which the team that we've got working in the business is fantastic. So there's plenty more that you can listen to on that.
You've bought a lot of companies. On a valuation basis, something like EV, EBITDA, how do they valuation of the companies you're buying compare to your own valuation? Are you generally buying companies that trade above you because they're smaller and growing faster, or is it a mixture?
It's the other way around. Our valuation at the moment is, is in the low 30 times PE ratio. So generally we're able to buy businesses on a lower multiple. But when we're looking at the businesses, we generally don't look at that. We look at the internal rate of return that particular business can deliver, for longer term. And our threshold is that we buy businesses with over a 10% internal rate of return. So apply like a private equity type dynamic to it. And when we come to market to raise money, we try and deliver a 5 to 10% earnings accretion. So our existing shareholders will benefit out of it, and new shareholders that come in will also benefit.
Thank you.
Yeah. So generally lower than our multiple, but when we're looking at financials, we don't look at it that way.
I had a question, if I may, Dave, about acquisition and culture and maintaining the culture of the business that you have. You talked about the response rates from the surveys and people buying into the story. But if you're buying so many companies with their own identities, how do you translate them through to the GBG, GB Group way of working?
Yeah, that's it's a great question on that. There's lots of ways that we do things. First of all is when we're looking at a business, we've generally known the businesses that we bought for several years, yeah, and we've either competed with them or we just know them. So we know the culture from outside in. We get to know the senior management team before we buy the business, so we understand how they work. And when they are on board, we try and we are generally very open and transparent with everything. Yeah. So it's not like a big brother buying other businesses. We just we're just one of them. It becomes like a small family within a bigger family. And those sort of, it's really difficult to explain. Everyone just gets on with each other. Everyone just helps each other. Everyone's accessible. Everyone knows where we're going. It's just, they just become a family in a family. Yeah. And that's really it. We're just very, very simple people, very clear objectives, and people know where they stand with us.
So do you keep the management teams for the companies you buy?
Where possible, yeah. Sometimes when people make life-changing money, they'll commit to us for a year or 2 years, but we always contingency plan in that. We tend to keep the chief technology officers, the CTOs in the business, because out of our 1,000 people, we've got about 400 engineers or developers, And we're breaking new ground on the types of things we're doing. So we're a really interesting place to work, from a technology perspective, not just technology, but, from a technology perspective.
Questions? Gentleman here, please. Thank you.
I don't know your business. I know bits of this kind of identity and location and fraud data stuff. It's very fragmented. Lots of different ways of doing it, protocols. Engaging with it as a company is extremely hard because everybody does it differently, and so there's a big hurdle each time. Is your value not data, but aggregation, simplification?
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on with how complex it is. There's multiple ways of doing it. And I'd say the best analogy is like the data access, the global data access is a real value because it's taken many, many years to build up. But that's like the fuel to the engine. Yeah, so the aggregation, the layering of the data using our software and the triangulation of that with pinpoint accuracy is, in sub-second is the IP of the business that way. But it is always a combination of both. And no one else has got that global data access. So it is a combination of both. Picking up on your other point about the complexities of the marketplace, in the three areas that we're touching, they're in the low billions of dollar target addressable marketplace. There's enough space for many, many businesses to be successful in that space. We're not going to say we're going to be number one because there's always different ways of doing it along the supply and value chain.
I have a question about the geographic spread of your revenue. From what I can see, 91% of your revenue comes from the EMEA region, based on 2018 figures.
Yeah.
That's one of the highest in your peer group of mid-sized vendors, whereas the larger vendors have significantly more presence in North America, and yours is about 6%. Are you looking to diversify on your spread more?
Yeah, so if you're going back to the accounts on there, that's where the source invoicing is. So we've got customers in 72 countries. Your point about the US, I'll come back to the US side in a second. So last year, 45% of the business was outside of the UK. The majority of that is UK, Spain, Gibraltar, Malta, where the gambling companies are. Yeah, we've got a few high-tech organisations based out of Ireland. Yeah, so as we move into the current financial year, the being underweight in the US was one of the prime reasons why we bought Ideology, which is Atlanta-based, all of its revenue in the US, and they were able to partner up with the international customers that we deal with the West Coast, with them handling their services in the US. So absolutely underweight in the US. First step into that on the identity side is with that buying Ideology. Our location services, we're growing it out organically from New York and via partnership arrangements in San Francisco. And then apart from that, in Asia Pacific, our highest growth line of business is our fraud management, and we're very strong in there. So we've moved on a long way from that position, and we will continue to grow outside of EMEA.
Okay, and if I can follow up on this sector focus that you have, I mean, obviously gambling is your number one. Gambling and gaming.
It isn't actually, just use that as an example. So the sector-wise, the highest sector is financial services, which is about a third of our revenue. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The second highest sector is now actually, well, it's joint with UK government is a key customer. Mm-hmm. The second is retail and e-commerce, and then the gambling is fourth after that.
Fourth. Okay.
Yeah. So over time, so the e-commerce has gone from 7% up to 10%. Mm-hmm. Over time, that will become a big number two to the financial services.
Clearly, you've got some very important intelligence data there. How do you keep your integrity and independence from national intelligence services who might be interested in what you've got?
Yes, it's a great question. So I have to go into quite a lot of detail on this. We've got a fraud management software in the UK that is used by Her Majesty's Customs and Revenue to track down people that haven't paid tax. We have 70% of the police forces use our software to track down criminals and associates of those criminals. And some of the intelligence agencies do use our UK-based software. So how we keep the dividing line between that and correct commercial use of it is for the government agencies, they have key access to the full electoral roll because they're government bodies. And that's how we make the distinction. The other services we provide those are readily available to other commercial entities.
I was thinking more of foreign intelligence services.
In terms of, we don't.
For
It's
instance,
one of those.
in America, any financial data would be wanted by the American government. What firewalls have you got?
So it's the way that we do it is the key prevention on that. So when we're verifying somebody across border, we go into the country and bring an answer back and another answer back and another answer back. We never bring data out of the country. Yeah. And what we do when we're checking it is we're checking it in country that, you know, Dave Wilson is same name on the passport, driver's license, utility. His date of birth agrees with all the source government documents. So we're checking that in country, but bringing the answers back. Yeah. So we're never in that position where, you know, there's any request from any government anywhere for access to it, because all they can get access to is a confidence score. You know, it's 95% Dave Wilson. He's not politically exposed. And yes, yes, no, no, pass, fail, all of those. There's no information for them to get access to. And that really does help us on the, I'll cover the security question, that really does help us be data protection compliant globally. So any regulatory requirements is good news for ourselves on that, because there's a lot of GDPR and safe harbouring and regulations globally. In terms of the data security, all businesses are subject to threats that way. We've got DDoS layer, we've got threat attack monitoring, all of the things you'd expect business. Probably the biggest safeguard is that identity information. It's the hacker would just get a lot of technology links and pass, fail, refer. So it'd be like no real value to them. And on our fraud management side, at the moment, all of the installations are on-premise within our customers for banking. We're moving through the passage of time, driven by the Chinese banks, to have that to be a hosted service. So there's like natural protection there because it's within the bank's own firewall.
I just had a couple of quickies, if I may. You might have covered this on one of the slides, so forgive me if you did. On the revenue, what's the percentage that's recurring revenue? And is that a growing percentage, or what's the pattern there?
Yeah, we have about 6 to 7%, attrition. So, by definition, 94% of it's recurring. All of our business is contracted, and what we say to the market is that we've got 70% high visibility of revenue. How we work that is take the year end, take off an arbitrary 10%, and then divide that by the broker's consensus. So we can see about 70% of next year's business. So that's probably more meaningful than the recurring side.
Okay. I think then, Dave, that's it. We're done. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for coming.